Good morning. Hello, everyone. I am here popping in live today. Typically, go over on Instagram live once a week, but we're having some streaming issues. So I decided to pop in on Facebook Live. So if you're here joining us, you are getting a special treat today. My special guest today is Laura Christensen, and she has so much experience. And what I really enjoy every time I talk to Laura is I learn something new. So I invite you to listen to this conversation with open ears and an open mind and an open heart. Laura has over 30 years experience in acupuncture, functional medicine, herbal medicine, and health coaching. And Laura, you have such a rich background and your own personal healing journey that you've gone through. Can you share a little bit as what brought you your career and your education and your passion and what brought you here to today?
Well, I think that the one of the interesting things is that I was told a story by my mother that when I was 4, I went to the bedside of my grandfather who was dying of brain cancer with a little cup full of sticks and leaves, and I said, "I'm going to heal you, grandfather." So clearly, this was, I came in with it for sure. And my dad was a doctor. I have a picture of myself playing doctor with my Raggedy Ann doll, and I have the stethoscope and all that stuff. I remember I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew this is what it was supposed to look like. So, I've been curious about healing my entire life, especially in the late 70s. There was like this whole kind of holistic movement brewing. And that's really when I got on board. I started meditating at age 15 through transcendental meditation. And then when I was 26, I was in an enormous car accident, victim of a drunk driver, head-on collision, broke most of my bones, hospitalized for about 3 months. I lost about 90 pounds. I was very, very fit, very muscular, intensive care unit on a ventilator for a month, 18 surgeries, plastic surgery, everything. And climb my way back out of that. And that was a huge learning for me about how healing actually goes in the body. Because, before that, I didn't have any real understanding. In your 20s, you're healthy. And then I learned the body always is trying to heal. The body knows what to do. This is a perfect machine built by the creator to restore and maintain itself. And so, I learned how to facilitate that, and especially how using mental attitude of just staying in the present moment was super important, especially for pain management and just like, staying in the gym and, lifting one plate, lifting two plates and getting it all back. And then a few a few years later, I had breast cancer when I was 60, and then I had it again when I was 64. So this was two little, very small tumors caught very early, not big treatment, but still, it was another moment for me to take a look and say, how can I tweak my health even more? What do I need to do to get my next 10 years the best they can be? So I'm living proof. I'm on the path. I'm walking my talk.
Thank you so much for being open with that experience. Because sometimes when we're in a health field, especially like a natural health field, and we have something come up like cancer, it can, it's like we're hesitant to share those stories, right? And whether that your path so that you could go through it and then have those awarenesses for yourself, and then continue teaching and sharing and spreading that hope with other people.
Yeah, well, I want to speak to that just real quickly. People always say to me, oh, it's so terrible you had cancer. And well, I'm a genetic cancer person. And, I'm probably going to keep producing little tumors. I'm under extreme watchful care. But also, what I always say is I had cancer for a minute.
Mm.
And, and this whole cancer survivor, cancer free, I don't even buy into that languaging. It's just, another phase of how my body is going. And, I consider cancer a medically manageable state of being. So, I don't get bogged down about it at all. Yeah. And
That's
I think it's important to be out about it because, like, so many, right? The numbers are increasing all the time. So, there.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure we'll dive into more about my mindset in this conversation. So I want to dive into first with, because you have such a long career helping so many people, I'm sure you've seen people get stuck on their healing journey, like whatever that is they're trying to, what they're dealing with, they're trying to see improvement, they're trying to overcome. What are some patterns that you've noticed with people who are quote unquote stuck?
Yeah, well, as an acupuncturist, we see this a lot. People come to us with really, really weird problems, things that nobody else has helped with. They've been to every doctor, they've been to the chiropractor, they've done some nutrition, they tried to figure it out on their own, and they hope acupuncture is going to be the magic. And I learned a long time ago that acupuncture is not magic and that people who are not healthy don't get better very fast. But they told us, oh, you have to give them herbs. Well, people don't like taking Chinese herbs. Oh, they need to eat better. Well, they're not going to eat better necessarily. So, they want magic to come. And so I try to be straight with patients like, that's not how this works. What we do is facilitate healing. But I learned from a really interesting man named Jerry Tennant, he's a medical doctor in Texas who was actually one of the kind of, not the inventor, but a collaborator on the cataract surgery way back. Jerry got viral meningitis in the 1980s, and he was sick for 10 years. And he went to bed and he studied medicine. He went all the way back to the 1800s. He read everything. And one of the things that he realized was that there are very specific things that interfere with the body's ability to heal. And so understanding that framework has enabled me to facilitate my patients getting better by either adding supplementation or modifying acupuncture treatments to help them get through that. And sometimes it's like lifestyle changes, but now we actually have a framework to think this through. So that's really, really helpful.
So what are some of those underlying blocks?
Well, the top one is thyroid. And we now understand that there is an epidemic of subclinical hypothyroidism, which means people walking around with underfunctioning thyroids that never get picked up, partly because of the way the labs are done, partly because of the way that we think about thyroid condition. And so we see it in the form of obesity, especially in our culture, and people whose hair is falling out and they go to the doctor and they don't get help because their TSH isn't bad enough, and all of that. So that's number one. The second one is adrenal problems. And again, now that we live in the sympathetic dominant culture, right? The phone, the phone, the phone, the phone, we never come down out of sympathetic excess. And so, we've been pumping out cortisol, helicopter mom, all of that. And at work, more internet, more access, more digital life, plus, other work that we have to do. Our nervous system never calms. And so the adrenals, for most of us, have become sort of hyperactive and now are kind of in burnout mode. So that's huge. Like, back to the thyroid. The thyroid is responsible for managing the temperature of the body, right? And most of the biochemical reactions in the body are temperature sensitive. And so if we're not at the optimal temperature, all this biochemistry isn't going to work properly. So, yeah. And then with the adrenal gland, the adrenal is really integrated with all the other hormones. And so if we have too much cortisol all the time, then like everything else can't, get balanced. So that's a big deal. Another one is scar tissue. A lot of us are walking around with scar tissue from surgeries, scar tissue even from dental surgery, scar tissue from all kinds of things. And even when I studied Japanese acupuncture, we learned that even a tiny scar from a mosquito bite can be an interference generator that keeps the chi from being able to flow through the body. Now, I tend to think of it more as electricity or electrons, because I think this thing is an electron thing. And so scar tissue is a big interference generator. Another factor is toxicity. So, I think we all have heard of detoxes. What does that even really mean? Somebody told me yesterday they were on a detox. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm drinking more water." Okay, that's a start. but
Not wrong.
yeah, we are all living in an increasingly toxic culture. I live in Iowa, and we know that glyphosate is like one of the number one toxins. We also know that Iowa has like the number one or two highest cancer rate because of agricultural chemicals. And those numbers don't go down. You know, we're the more and more increasing exposure to toxins. And so if we have a toxic load, that is something that keeps all this biology from working. And another thing is things like chronic infections. It is very, very easy for somebody to develop a chronic infection that is completely unknown to them or any healthcare provider. And one of the examples of that is a kind of an infection that can develop under a root canal. And this is something that's talked about a lot in the dentistry of Europe. But here in the US, it's kind of a secret, and in Canada, like we don't talk about that. And so one of my teachers has said that something like 75% of root canals will develop an infection at the root of the tooth in time. And I myself developed one about 10 years after a root canal. And thank God I knew that because I asked for the exam, they found the infection, and I had a treatment. But that little brewing infection can really, really use up a lot of biological energy that then is not then available for other things. And another one of these things is the immune system issue. And, you know, we're seeing this explosion of autoimmune disease, right? And we know now that if you have one autoimmune disease, you probably have more if you haven't found out yet. And if you haven't, you will have more. And so, you know, what does that say? Well, now we understand that one of the main generators of autoimmune disease is a less than perfect lining of the intestines, which allows, you know, molecules to get into the lymphatics that don't really belong there, and then brings the whole system on high alert. And so this sort of cascade of immune problems, and you know, we see it clearly in children with eczema and so on, but you know, in adults, so much psoriasis and you know, on and on and on. Oh, and look at the advertisements on TV, right? All the, when I'm watching TV in the evening, it's all like injectable drugs for autoimmune disease and other drugs for blood sugar and heart disease. So, yeah, that tells you a lot. So, that's pretty much the list. The other one is heavy metals, and we can get heavy metal exposure from a lot of places that we don't know. But probably the top one is from mercury amalgam fillings, which we now understand when we bite down, a tiny puff of gas is emitted from that filling and we're inhaling it. When we chew, you know, tiny, tiny microscopic bits of mercury. And I don't know about you, but when I was in college, we had mercury. We used to play with it. When we broke a thermometer as children, we would like roll the mercury around and scoop it up and stuff. So yeah, now we understand. So we have all of these things which are affecting most of us, and we don't think about it. We don't address it. We don't have the tools to know what to do about it. So that's the list. And
Amazing. Yeah. And like you said, like there's so much, like it's just, it's life, right? Like it's just the things that are going through in life. And our body's always doing the best that it can based on what's going on, right? Based on the food we're eating, based on, if it's, again, if it's dealing with an infection that you don't know it's there, like, of course, things are going to be off because your body is dealing with something that you don't even know. So maybe you're asking your body to do something. It's like, I'm over here doing this, and I think this is important. So there potentially is a disconnect. So I want to circle back to the thyroid and adrenal first. You mentioned the hypoactivity and the adrenals and the cortisol and how they're working. How would someone know that that's an issue? How do you assess that for people and kind of bring that light to that?
Well, you know, I don't have the ability to order labs under my current license. And so I've ended up being kind of a seat of the pants diagnostician. And, you know, this is something it's like you don't have to have a license to figure this out. It's just science. And so the signs of hypothyroidism, basically everywhere you go, you see it and you don't know that that's what you're seeing. One of them is dry hair, brittle hair, hair loss, um, nails flaking, brittle, breaking easily. And, a lot of people are having their nails done to try to control that. And then, of course, the nail thing makes it worse. Another thing, of course, is difficulty losing weight, fatigue, but probably one of the old standards is low basal body temperature. And so, they say, now this may not be a 100% reliable test, but I think it's a good sort of general guide. If your temperature, when you wake up first thing in the morning and you don't move, don't get out from under the covers, is 97.2 or lower, it's highly likely that you have low thyroid.
Mm.
So, these people will say, I'm cold all the time when everybody else is warm. I have to have a space heater under my desk at work. They're always wearing a sweater when other people aren't. So that, and then fatigue, of course. And, people have fatigue for many, many reasons. So we don't want to just say you have fatigue, so you have thyroid. The other thing is dry skin and skin that is easily wounded. Like people will say, oh, I have this scratch and it's not healing and my skin seems so dry. And yeah, so those are like the big flashing lights. And of course, I don't know if I just said this, weight gain and difficulty losing weight. And so that's one of those telltale signs that tells you the thyroid is kind of almost at the top of the chain as far as controlling a lot of this endocrine function that is integrated with weight loss. The adrenal thing is a little bit more difficult to suss out because when people go into adrenal dysfunction, they move through different stages, but we kind of break it down into the first stage, which is this like running around, feeling frantic all the time, can't sleep, can't settle down, this kind of excitability. And so that's sort of the first level. But I don't think that we see many patients in that level anymore. I think more people are like, okay, I've been producing all now, the adrenal has got two channels, adrenaline, which is the one that enables you to pick up a car when it's on top of your child, and then the cortisol, which is the one that keeps you running the race as long as you can. And the thing with cortisol is that it is a survival hormone, right? It enables us to persist under difficult conditions. But when we've been producing it at a high level for a really long time, our adrenals are gradually less able to produce it. And so this is what we commonly call adrenal fatigue. And one of the big clues to this one is when somebody says, I have this abdominal fat I just can't get rid of. Like, I've lost the fat on my legs, I've lost the fat on my arms, my face, but my belly. And so, when you see a fat belly, you have to ask, well, is that fat inside in between the organs, or is it sort of on the surface of the tummy? And if it's on the surface, it's probably the adrenal gland. So the way that I talk about this is like, okay, you're primitive person and you have a great campsite with great food sources and you're all settled there. And suddenly there's a threat, right? And you're going to have to pick up and leave and move your campsite, and you don't know whether you're going to have food anytime soon. And so, cortisol is the hormone that saves some fat on our belly so that when we pick up our campsite and go, we still have some energy to burn after we arrived in our new destination. And so, that's a respectable function of the body. But in this situation, because we never drop down out of this stress response, then we never burn off that fat reserve. So I think that's one of the big keys with adrenal function. The other one is people who say, I'm really keyed up at night, and then in the morning, I can't get up and go. These are the people who it takes them an hour or two or 6 cups of coffee to wake up. And that's a really, really big telltale sign. I can't get going in the morning. So, when we see people in these kind of different phases of adrenal fatigue, the other test is to see which kind of nutritional supplement helps the most. And there are a few different herbs that are used, like ashwagandha, rhodiola, eleutherococcus, and some other kinds of supplements. So sometimes we can test and, do you do better with licorice root, or do you need something else like adrenal glandular to kind of pick things up? And you know, the other real great test is a salivary hormone test where we measure the metabolites of adrenal function at different times of day, and then we can see people's like daily curve. And you know, I've had a patient who first thing in the morning should have had super high cortisol, but they had below measurable. So, you know, this is a person we have to like pile on supplements. We have to nourish the adrenal gland and also remind the whole system how to self-regulate. So, yeah, it's a big one, and we've all got some degree of it, I believe.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I definitely want to dive into scar tissue a bit because I'm fascinated with fascia the more I learn about it. So can you explain a little bit like fascia and what happens when we have a cut or a scar?
Well, yeah, fascia is one of those amazing things. Um, I was teaching at the University of Iowa a few years ago. I taught a holistic medicine course, and somewhere in the middle of one of those semesters, there was like this big news flash. Fascia has been determined to be an organ. And my students happened to bring this into me, and I had stumbled across it as well. And we just laughed so much because, like, this, especially in the world of acupuncture, this has been known, but even in the world of general science, this has been known. And so, you know, one of my big wake ups was when my husband was deer hunting, and I used to do the butchering, and he shot a deer through the shoulder blade one time. And so, you know, I'm doing the butchering, and I got to the shoulder blade, and the bone was shattered, but there was this big balloon of water over the top of it. And I remember going like, what is this? And then I realized, oh, this is these layers of connective tissue that are all like in between the muscles that go over the shoulder blade. And what happened was at the moment of the trauma, the body like rushed a whole lot of fluid there to try to like deal with the impact. And there it was. And that was just huge for me. The other thing that you know, I used to teach dissection when I was in college. I was the TA in the anatomy class. And,
Fascinating.
you know, you might have been in school around the same time. We used to like strip away the fascia from the whatever we were dissecting, like toss it out. Oh, that's some junk, just toss that. And, you know, in the world of acupuncture, even I remember hearing something like 25 or 30 years ago that the fascia is actually the thing that carries the so-called chi. So, and that electrons are really what that are, and electrons are carried at a speed faster than the speed of light. So now we're like, oh, so what is this really saying about physiology? So, you know, when I always say if you are a meat eater and you've taken the skin off a chicken, you know that silvery shiny stuff over the muscle, that is fascia. It is connective tissue. It when you think about it, it covers every muscle, right? But it also covers every bone. It also covers every organ, and it covers every nerve and every blood vessel. And even more than that, it goes in between every cell, especially of muscle. Okay, so this is a giant thing. It goes everywhere. This is the matrix, and this is the information superhighway of the body. This is where and it's full of fluid, right? Microscopically, small amounts of fluid. This is the one giant thing that you almost could say is the wrapper of everything, is the communication between every cell. This is how, you know, your toe cell communicates with your tongue or something. It's the ultimate information superhighway. And what's happening is molecules are communicating through it, but also these electrons that are super important for like dispersing energy through the body. So back to your question, scar tissue. So when we have any kind of injury, even just a little wound to our skin, the body repairs that by laying down collagen, which is the kind of molecule that all this stuff is made of. It's kind of rubbery and stretchy. but it has some substance to it. So the body lays down collagen, but when the body lays down scar tissue like that, the collagen fibers are all in different directions. They're not all, so when we are born and develop, our all these fibers are kind of aligned and organized nicely. But when we have scar tissue, it's like this disorganized thing. So through that area where there's a scar, the information cannot flow, and the electrons cannot flow. They come there and they get all lost in the shuffle. And so when you think about it, anytime you've had any kind of surgery, especially back in the day when they used to open us up and, get inside our abdomen and dig around in there, there's scar tissue from that. And it can occupy layers and layers and layers. And so scar tissue really is a fundamental interference pattern that keeps the body from being able to communicate with itself. And one of the miracles that I've learned about is that if you have a scar on your body, you will have the same scar in the exact same part of your ear that corresponds to your body part. So, in ear acupuncture, we know there's a map of the entire body on the ear, just like in reflexology of the foot. And you can see. So I had a patient who had a scar on their belly up and down the middle. And then I looked on their ear and there it was. I could literally
Wow.
see it. So, this is huge. This is not like, oh, it's just scar tissue. This is the thing. And in Chinese medicine, they discussed this even 5,000 years ago. They said there's a big wrapper that holds everything in alignment and keeps everything organized. So, this is huge.
So what can someone do with the scar tissue? I mean, like your personal
Oh,
story with your 18 surgeries, I imagine there's a ton of scar
oh
tissue. Any
yeah,
modalities, things that
sure.
can help with this?
Well, scar tissue massage, this is really important, especially in the early stages after some kind of surgery. It's nice to break open a capsule of vitamin E oil and massage the scar, and especially like stretch it and get it going in different directions. That helps. But really, the biggest therapy, especially for internal scarring, is a high dose proteolytic enzyme. So, what do I mean by that? We're talking about enzymes that break down protein. And the famous ones are nattokinase, that's probably the top one, lumbrokinase, and serrapeptase. And there are a number of different products on the market that have these. And you can take these with food to break down the protein that you eat. But what we want to do for scar tissue is take them on an empty stomach. And it seems like these things would injure your stomach, but no, your stomach is like super powered. It can take it. And so we're going to give you high dose proteolytic enzymes on an empty stomach and be consistent with those. Those help with inflammation also. They help prevent heart disease. They're just fantastic. And so they will help soften scars and break it all down in time.
Oh, that's fascinating. Super helpful. Yeah, I was recently had a practitioner. She was just like, oh, we can just do a biopsy for that. I'm like, why do we cut the fascia if we don't need to? Like, no. If it's just like for curiosity, let's say, right? Some things are needed, but it's like if we don't need it, and at this point, I'm sure all of us, if we've lived enough circles around the sun, we've got scars from falling off bikes and sliding into baseball diamonds and
Yeah.
surgeries and all kinds of stuff, dental work. So many operations, birthing, lots of
Well,
things.
and interestingly, when I see patients who have had a tummy tuck, this is huge because now we've sort of like we've picked up the skin off the front of the body. We've removed a big piece of it, and then we've like moved it all down. We had to move the belly button to a new location, and this is just incredibly problematic. And as an acupuncturist that does a lot of palpation, it's difficult. So I highly don't recommend tummy tucks.
Anything we have not talked about yet today that you feel we should cover for our audience about overcoming these blocks to healing that you've mentioned?
Well, as I talk about it, I was thinking one of the blocks that I forgot to talk about is emotional stuff. And
Oh,
you
we're just going to talk about that now with like a minute to go.
Yeah, trauma. So, trauma is a huge block. It interferes with the nervous system. It causes many, many problems. And I think it's very timely. We see all this PTSD. I think it's time for us all to do whatever we can do for trauma. Yeah, let's not leave that out.
Very, yeah, good way to make sure that's included in our conversation. And again, that's a lifetime of work potentially, but yeah, if you know you've got that stuff going on, and it's helpful to connect with someone if again you've been on the path, so to speak, and you know something's not right, you're not getting the results, you're not really kind of turning that corner. It's time to look into these blocks, and a practitioner like Laura, who has this depth of experience and looks for these root causes that other people maybe aren't looking for, we can identify some of these things. So Laura, thank you for your time today. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for that to happen?
Well, I think phoning me is a great idea. And my phone number is in the US is 341-031. That's my office. And my email address is Laura at truehavenhealth, all one word.com. True Haven Health. And I would love to visit with you and see how we can help you out.
Amazing. And do you work with people within the state of Iowa, or do you work with people?
Oh, all over.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Amazing. So if you found this fascinating, you'd love to get in touch with Laura and see if there's an assessment for any of these blocks that you suspect. She's given your phone number to call the office, very, very generous, and her personal email. So go ahead, and any other follow-up questions, you can add comments here or message us directly on Instagram or Facebook, and we would be happy to have a conversation with you. And if you're one of my followers, I can connect you with the information to get in touch with Laura as need be. So Laura, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your expertise and your wisdom with our community and the wider everyone who was going to be able to get to watch this video. And thank you so much for your time, and everyone who's tuned in with your time. We will talk to you soon. Bye for now.